What happens if the US runs out of money? US President Joe Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy are set to meet once again on Monday to discuss a deal to lift the US debt ceiling. An agreement must be reached by June the 1st, or the Treasury Department has warned the US faces a potential default. The debt cap currently stands at roughly 31.4 trillion US dollars, but that limit was hit in January, forcing the Treasury Department to use extraordinary measures to provide the government with cash. But Democrats and Republicans have very different ideas on how to proceed. President Biden said he won't agree to the latest proposal from Republicans.
I'm not going to agree to a deal that protects wealthy tax cheats and crypto traders while putting food assistance at risk for nearly 1 million Americans. And it's time for Republicans to accept that there is no bipartisan deal to be made solely on their partisan terms.
Historically, the US has never defaulted on its debt, so we don't know what it's like, as this will likely cause significant economic damage in the US and across the globe. CNN chief business correspondent Christine Romans joins us from New York to answer that huge question. What does happen if America runs out of money?
You know, the U.S. government bond market is really the cornerstone of the global financial system, quite frankly. So we don't even really know what the ripple effects would be. We just know that catastrophic, Armageddon, these are the kinds of words that economists and policymakers use when they imagine a world in which the United States doesn't have enough money to pay all of its debts. There's about $57 billion in the bank account right now, the Treasury coffers right now. And as you get into June, there are going to be some big payments that'll be necessary. Veterans benefits, Social Security, that's paid on the second, third, and fourth Wednesday of the month. And the big question is, what happens to the Treasury Department when they're trying to decide which bills to pay if you don't raise the debt limit? It's sort of a Hunger Games of sorts, trying to decide what would have the least amount of damage and help the most people. Maybe the Treasury would decide to keep all of its fixed payments if it could. So Social Security it would try to pay, veterans benefits it would try to pay, but maybe it would give contractors IOUs. This is what they're trying to game out here, trying to figure out how that would work. Now, if you give federal contractors, a big part of the American economy, IOUs, you're in a situation where economists at Goldman Sachs have estimated that the day after you go over this X date, you could, in effect, shut down 1/10 of the American economy. It just stops all of that economic activity. That would certainly cause a recession and probably cause, a calamity in stock and bond markets around the world. There's always there's just so much at stake. It is so intertwined, the U.S. Debt market and American debt borrowing. Max, a good way to look at it here is that the world relies on the U.S. debt, right? The U.S. spends beyond its means and issues debt in return that is the most sought after investment in the world. It allows the U.S. to invest in its economy and invest in itself and grow to the biggest economy in the world. So you're hearing these rumblings in Washington that this debt is such a bad thing. But in the eyes of international investors, it is something that is a strength, not a weakness. But this is all politics here. This is a political game, not an economic game at this moment. And that's what has investors so concerned.
All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakwadash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who I learned this truth from, and I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. And yes, as you can see, the U.S. is running out of money, because it can't pay its debt. So I'm just going to go into this article a little bit, and then bring out a couple of scriptures. Lord willing, this lesson is edifying and straight to the point. And the headline reads, "The mother of all crises, a U.S. debt default would ricochet around the world." Excuse me. And this is from the London CNN. And it says, "The global economy has been hit by 2 huge shocks in 3 years. It might be about to suffer a third in the shape of a U.S. debt crisis after the C pandemic and the first major war in Europe since 1945. The specter of American government being unable to pay its bills now stalking financial markets. For most, it's unthinkable, perhaps because the consequences are so terrifying that it may never happen. There were signs Friday that negotiations in Washington to increase the amount the U.S. government can borrow were gaining momentum. But if it does, it could make the 2008 global financial crisis look like a walk in the park. The fallout from a default will be 1,000,000 times worse, said Danny Blanchflower, an economics professor at Dartmouth University and former interest rate setter at the Bank of England. What happens if the greatest what happens if the greatest economic monolith in the world can't pay its bills? The consequences are frightful. The belief that America's government will pay its creditors on time underpins the smooth functioning of the global financial system. It makes the dollar the world's reserve currency and U.S. Treasury securities the bedrock of bond markets worldwide. If the credibility of the Treasury's commitment to pay comes into question, it can wreak havoc across a range of global markets, said Maurice Obstfeld, non-resident senior fellow at the Peterson Institute of International Economics, a think tank in Washington. During the 2011 standoff over the U.S. debt ceiling, the S&P 500 index of leading U.S. shares plunged more than 15%. The index kept falling even after a deal was reached, which happened just hours before the government ran out of funds. Stock markets have largely shrugged off a possible default so far, even as the so-called X of June 5th draws nearer. That's when the government, unable to borrow more, could run out of money, according to the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, who provided an update timeline Friday afternoon. Yellen still believes the deal will be reached in time. One of the concerns I have is that in the run-up to an agreement, when one does occur, there can be substantial financial distress, she said Wednesday. Fitch has already placed America's AAA credit rating, its highest score, on watch for a possible downgrade because of the political brinksmanship. The move brought back memories of 2011 when S&P downgraded the United States from AAA to AA. S&P has still not reinstated the perfect credit rating more than a decade later. Any downgrade, however small, affects the pricing of trillions of dollars of U.S. government debt and causes future borrowing costs to rise. Yields on short-dated Treasury bills have already ticked up, and U.S. mortgages rates have jumped amid the uncertainty. And yes, that's pretty much all I'm going to read. But just like they're, pretty much stating in this article, the U.S. is due to run out of money any day now, because at first it was supposed to be June 1st, and then they pushed it back to June 5th, So if they don't reach a deal by then, the U.S. is going to default, on its debt. So I'm going to go to the book of Habakkuk, chapter 2, and I'm going to start at verse 3. I'm going to start at verse 3. And it says, "For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie, though it tarry. Wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry, it will not tarry. Behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith." And yes, that's talking about Esau Edom, because his soul is not upright, he is the wicked. Verse 5, "Yea, also, because he transgresseth by wine, he is a proud man, neither keepeth at home, who enlarges his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. Shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, Woe to him that increaseth that which is not his? How long? And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay." And yes, that thick clay, is debt, and pretty much the U.S. is in debt, $31 trillion in debt, And that's pretty much what it's talking about, because Esau Edom, he is the thief, he's a robber. He steals, he kills, and he destroys, And pretty much, they're doing this by design, but the American economy is getting ready to collapse again, and it's going to be worse than, the Great Depression in the 1930s, and it's going to be even worse than, the, economic collapse in 2008 is going to be worse than both of those times, because once this collapse happened, the U.S. economy is not going to be the same. It's already not the same, but, it's not going to be how it used to be, because pretty much what they're trying to do is phase out the dollar, and bring in their digital currency, the Fed now, which again is going to go on those devices, those RFID, CHIPs, because again, that's ultimately what it's leading up to. Then I'm going to go to the book of Isaiah chapter 36 and verse 6, and it says, "Lo, thou trustest in the staff of this broken reed on Egypt, whereon if a man lean, it will go into his hand and pierce it. So is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all that trust in him." And yes, excuse me, it's like everyone that trusts in this man, in this system, is ultimately going to receive that device, Then I'm going to come to the book of Jeremiah chapter 51. And I'm going to start at verse 8. And it says, "Babylon is suddenly fallen and destroyed. Howl for her pain. Howl for her. Take balm for her pain. If so be, she may be healed. We would have healed Babylon, but she is not healed. Forsake her, and let us go every one into his own country, for her judgment reaches unto heaven, and is lifted up even to the skies." And yes, America is not going to shake back after this, because when our Lord Yahushua returns, this land is going to be utterly destroyed, because the only way for it to truly be peace on the earth is if America gets destroyed. And that's happening. This country is collapsing from within. It's pretty much the Roman Empire all over again, just in modern times, because just the way Rome collapsed, America is going to collapse the same way. They're pretty much crashing their own government, or crashing their own economy, just so that they can, try and fulfill, their plans of their new world order, And then I'm going to go to the book of James, chapter 5, verse 1. And it says, "Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries. that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and your silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days. Behold, the hire of the laborers who have reaped down your fields, which is kept of you, Slakia, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth, and the cries of them which have reached are into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth, and been wanton. Ye have nourished your hearts as in a day of slaughter. Ye have condemned and killed the just, and hath not Slakia, and he does not resist you. And yes, Esau, Edom, has heaped together treasures for the last days, because the elites, they have the real money, which is silver and gold, precious metals. They actually have resources. And meanwhile, they give us, these FRNs, these paper dollars, which is ultimately monopoly money, because it's worthless. It isn't backed by anything, So here's the reason why they're trying to crash the dollar. So once this dollar collapses, and the American economy crashes, economies all over the world are going to collapse as well. Because like I said, America is pretty much keeping, these other economies going as well, And then I'm going to end it on this, because ultimately this is what's going to take place, very soon. I'm going to go to the book of Ezekiel, chapter 7, and verse 19, and it says, They shall cast their silver in the streets, and their gold shall be removed. Their silver and their gold shall not be able to deliver them in the day of the wrath of the Lord. They shall not satisfy their souls, neither fill their bowels, because it is the stumbling block of their iniquity. And yes, ultimately, the U.S. dollar is going to be worthless, and people are going to cast their money in the streets. Like, the video I featured, a couple times of a man in Venezuela that ultimately, was walking down the street, and you see nothing but, their money, in the streets, thousands of dollars of, the Venezuelan currency in the streets, because it was worthless. They couldn't do anything with it, and ultimately that is what's coming to America. So hopefully, this country does default on its debt, so that this economy can collapse, So, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who I learned this truth from, and I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. Till the next time I say Shalom.